Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. Well, I'm so excited today. I'm going to get to really talk to Jason Holley. Now, Jason is somebody who I know has been around the circuit. He's so respected in the astrology world, in the astrology community, and I've seen his name at all kinds of conferences, but this is the first time I'm actually getting to talk to him. And he is going to be part of the very special event, Embracing the Community, a celebration of astrologies. Now, this is the online conference event of the year put on by the London School of Astrology and Synchronicity University. There are a limited number of coupon codes available to get 50% off now if you sign up for this wonderful, rewarding, incredible conference event. And I hope that you will join us. And I'm so happy that Jason is here with us as one of our speakers. Jason Holley teaches widely on astrology, psychotherapy, and myth, including as a faculty member at Southwestern College in Santa Fe and Astrology University Online. So he's a good nerd, just like me. I love it. Welcome, Jason. Thank you for
Hi.
being here.
Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, good to be with you.
So I love that you're a nerd like me. I love that you are teaching astrology and myth academically as well, and also, of course, within the astrology community. So I have an academic background that mixes astrology into it. So what is it like for you bringing this perspective into the academic fields?
Well, it's interesting. And the college where I have been teaching is very experientially oriented, and it's very transpersonally oriented. So there's really a pretty strong commitment to sort of whole consciousness learning, right? So there's the mental part, but then there's also emotional, somatic, spiritual, ecological, really all the different modes of perception. And so our teaching philosophy in that setting is very much to engage all those different modes of learning. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. So for me, it has been a pretty natural and easy place for astrology to come in, because the astrology that I'm passionate about is of the body, is of the spirit, is of the emotions and the psyche. It's a whole person experience, and so in many ways, it's really been a bridge place for me. That was actually in some ways where some of my earliest astrology teaching was sort of developed in that kind of a setting. Where, and the other part of it was that it was linked directly. The college that I was teaching at gives degrees in art therapy and counseling, and so it was immediately integrated in terms of how are you meeting other people with this? How does this come to life? It's not just abstract. So that way.
What do you mean when you talk about, you said like a holistic astrology, an astrology that is embodied? What do you mean by that, that is the type of astrology that interests you?
Well, what I mean is that it is a way of connecting with the stars from planet Earth, because that's actually where we are, right? So it's always interesting. Modern astrologer, traditionally astrology was said to be ruled by Mercury, but modern astrologers often think of Uranus as the ruler. Both are meaningful to me. But one of the things I always think about with Uranus being the ruler of astrology is that Uranus had a partner, and the partner was Gaia, right? Uranus was the father sky, Gaia was the mother Earth, and both of them are part of our astrology, right? It's not just the sky, it's actually where on Earth you're viewing the sky from, right? It's your location. And astrology, to me, what it's really about is recognize that we are embedded in a universe of meaning. It's embedded in an ecosystem of meaning, and besides in a literal physical ecosystem. But it kind of reinforces that you are of a certain time and a certain place. That you have a place and you have a space in the time field that is you, and you're embedded there. And so my interest is in astrology that helps people step even more fully into that reality, like to really acknowledge our connections to all our relations, right? So to all of the beings that are part of us and connected to us in the present and our ancestors. And so it's an astrology that really invites the instinctual and the wild and the connective on Earth, right? It's not just looking at a chart, it's looking at the sky, right? It's dancing with the stars, not just mining them for information, but actually creating intersubjective relationships with them. So that's maybe that's it's a little bit hard to put into words, but you can see my body starting to move around, right? Like, because
Right.
there's a animal quality to this, right? It's a zodiac is a circle of animals. I mean, so there's something about stepping into our very embodied experience here on planet Earth that is exciting to me.
It sounds really exciting. I love how you just said that the zodiac is animals. It's
Mm.
mythological animals, of course, as well as like literal animals. And so, how do you understand that? Can you explain and talk about that a little bit more?
Well, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, right. Some of the animals are not animals that we see with the modern consciousness, right? We don't see centaurs and sea goats, or at least I don't. I
Yet,
shouldn't.
right.
I'm actually quite confident there are some people who do,
Yeah, right.
but
Where's that LSD when you need it? Yeah.
exactly. And that's what I mean. It's in a different mode of consciousness, isn't it? Like
Mhm.
that where we see those things kind of like if you go to ancient cave paintings where you see these animals kind of they look like animals that we know, but they also don't quite look like animals that we know. And that's the same images that we have in our sky. It's like a different mode of perception. And that's kind of what's exciting about this is that you we can sort of relax ourselves into being able to experience that, right? Like actually one of the things that I have a lot of energy about with astrology is in not rationalizing the images of the zodiac, right? So Capricorn's a great example. It's the one I sometimes talk about where, Capricorn is a sea goat, right? It's a mer goat, and we do still have that image preserved, but mostly people relate to it as if it's just a goat, right? Just climbing goat, and it'll be referred to as the goat, and I think that's the first kind of tendency, and yet actually it's this much more interesting, strange image that if we let it kind of be there and relate to it that way, it can it dimensionalizes the sign, right? It makes it much more dimensional than just the climbing goat. It's this goat that can climb, but it's also got this fishtail connected into very deep waters. And most of the ancient myths about Capricorn do describe both dimensions. And so a lot of what I sometimes feel like I'm doing is returning astrology back a little bit into its own history, like a little bit just before the big Hellenistic shift, that took place. So just before that, when things were a little bit less defined and fuzzy, before you had all the aspect doctrines and rulerships and house systems, just before that, it was a little bit fuzzier, and in some ways, that is pretty powerful for experiencing it directly and not just getting in your head about it, right?
Right. And it's like it leaves room for the imaginative part of
Yes.
interpretation that much more. And
Yeah.
I was also thinking that this speaks to, you mentioned earlier, the ancestors and how astrology honors our ancestors. That's one very powerful way, among many ways that astrology
Mm,
can honor the ancestors, is to take it back before it
mhm,
got very literal and all kinds of formulas and things, and people understood
right.
that it's very powerful to consider that there's this sense of ancients understanding that when you allow that role of the imaginal or imagination to
Mm,
step in, you're allowing that dialogue to be the case
mhm,
that much more. At the beginning, you said something about how it isn't just that we're taking notes, we're looking at the sky and we're noting what's happening,
mhm.
but we're having that relationship. And it seems that the roots of astrology acknowledged that relationship that much more.
Yes, yes, and really invite us into a conscious participation with the sky, with what the sky shows us, with the world around us, right? The other thing that's interesting, of course, about ancient or astrology just before that period is it wasn't very personal, right? I mean, it really wasn't about natal charts for the most part at all, in fact, and so it kind of also opens us up to something a little bit bigger than just the obsession with the individual person and their psyche, but actually a curiosity about the condition of the world around you. And for me, especially in the time that we're in with our Earth and what is occurring, I mean, there is a way to connect with astrology that connects us more with the world around us and reminds us of how embedded we are, how we are not separate. that we're part of all kinds of relational configurations and connections, and within us also a similar thing is true, right? There are all these different parts of self, all these different creatures and animals within us. We are ourselves each an ecosystem, and the beauty of the night sky is it shows us the inner ecosystem and encourages us to see how all of them are related and all of them are necessary, even the ones that we think are the bad ones, the malefic ones or the benefic ones. And I'm not saying those words aren't helpful. I make use of all that stuff, but to me they're all part of an ecosystem, right? They're in there, and that's why, as a person who's worked with people for a long time, I find myself interested there in that inner ecosystem, and what is it like when in the same way that when you restore a salmon run and suddenly the forest all around that area of the river changes again and animals start returning and situations occur, or you take wolves and reintroduce them to Yellowstone, right? And then the river itself changes course because of a whole set of things that happen. Similarly, in the chart, like when I finally own my Venus in Scorpio and allow her to be, and don't always just say, oh my God, that thing just always bugs me, but if I actually just bring it in and I'm able to work with it, suddenly my entire configuration can change, right? And it's like there's this ecosystemic healing and a way approach to the psyche that to me is it's what it's what's the most beautiful thing that is amazing to me about astrology is that when you do that, when you begin to see that, you start to be able to see more vibrance and life across the system. So
We are our own ecosystem. That's very
yeah.
powerful. Yeah. I was thinking when we consider an ecosystem, yes, it has all kinds of pieces to it and varying desires and varying needs. And sometimes those desires and needs work well together, depending on the different entities involved, sometimes
Mm,
not so much.
mm,
And within us, yes, like we are complex. I think
mm,
sometimes as part of like spiritual bypass, we'd like to think that everything is harmonious, but
mhm,
the natural world even shows us that not everything is a
right.
harmonious space. And even
Yeah.
within us, we may not necessarily always feel harmonious, but that is spiritual too. There's some wisdom
Right.
in it too.
Yes, and attempting to insert our notion of what would look better or be better gets you the same kind of results intrapsychically that it gets when humans try to do that with ecosystems and say, "Oh, I think we should bring that animal into this continent," and then it takes off in all kinds of directions you don't know. There's a kind of a way that a similar, and this is often, to be honest, that's something for me with astrology where I think astrologies that are descriptive are what are meaningful to me, that just try to offer multiple modes of perception. That to prescribe is an entirely other affair that presumes that we really know what it's supposed to be or look like. And that presumes that somehow we can get outside of ourselves and get out. Just like humans tend to think they're above the other animals, we can get out of the system somehow. We're always embedded, and astrology really shows you your embeddedness, and actually can become a comfort that you're embedded, you're in these cycles, you're in these relations. And I really deeply believe that the kind of uh, consciousness that we need in the world right now is a consciousness of embeddedness, right? Like if we consider what's happening on Earth, uh, the story of separation that has been told about humans in relation to each other or in relation to the natural world is a story that is like a kind of a suicide, and
Yes.
and we need other stories, right? That are emerging, and astrology is a place. It's already there, right? The other stories are alive. They just need us to turn towards them and to listen carefully to that place in your chart. Like, what is Venus saying? Or, just like we can also listen, what is the Earth saying right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've thought about this quite a lot. I love that you're talking about this because with the discovery of Uranus, sort of like in
Mm,
tandem came the Cartesian split, right? This
right,
idea that spirit and matter are two separate things. And as a result of that, great things became possible. Like, on the one
right.
hand, equality, right? You were no
Mm,
longer
mhm,
judged for how able your body was or
mm,
your race or your gender or any of that. We
mm,
were able to move towards a greater sense of acknowledgement that we all
mhm,
have something within us that is divine, or maybe not divine, but that mind exists, and that
mm,
mind can be strong and equal in all of us regardless of what
mm,
the shell may be. And so
mm.
that's wonderful, but it also led to a lot of, as you said, destructive forces as
Yeah,
well, because if
yeah,
stuff is just stuff, then you can do anything you want to the environment, you can do
right,
anything you want to animals, because it's
right,
just stuff. And
right.
so this is something I'm so passionate about, and I love that you brought up, because yes, as much as astrology and part of the gift of astrology is, it reminds us of a more integrated way of observing our environment, of understanding our place in the world. But there has to be that sense of balance ultimately,
Mm,
right? We don't
mhm,
want to return to a place where we were judged for our outerness.
mhm,
At
mhm,
the same
mhm,
time, we also want to maybe find not a medium ground, but something that is more holistic, to go back to the word you were using
mhm,
earlier, where we can say, yes, there is spirit and we can honor spirit,
mhm,
and it's
mhm,
not based, and we don't judge people based on their race or their gender or
mhm.
anything like that, their physical abilities. But at the same time, we have lost something
Yeah.
by no longer allowing ourselves or giving permission to ourselves to have that dialogue with our external environment. And astrology restores that. And maybe
Mhm,
that's why so many people are feeling drawn to astrology that much more. With all the
mhm,
separation, increasing separation, at least
mhm.
it interconnects us again.
Yes, yes, exactly, and I think that's its real potential is to do that and to, uh, restore our experience, our felt lived experience of connection with the world around us and with life itself and with all the different forms of it. It's, it's an exciting, uh, thing that people are turning to that, as you say, it makes sense. I also I think very much along those lines about the Uranus century and the discovery uh, and that's the thing is sort of Uranus to the fore and Gaia put aside. And of course, in the myth, Uranus rapes Gaia. That's actually part of the story that the Greeks told, and we are in some sense exactly there, where the Iranian concern, the sky base, which, as you say, did bring incredible things that we don't want to go back from, and yet at the same time, there's been a complete neglect of the Gaian reality and of that of the reality of interconnection. And I have a deep hope that what astrology does for people, and I sense that is what it does for people, even when they don't know. That's what's occurring. I mean, in many ways, I think when we encourage people to experience astrology, we are actually also encouraging a shift in consciousness, right? Towards cyclical, not linear, right? And towards connected, not separate. And it's just because that's what's required for astrology to have any meaning. You have to say, okay, the time has a lot of texture and movement in it, and we are uh, bound up with all kinds of other beings and realities, and so otherwise there's no astrology. So I often feel like it is also, yeah, it's a vehicle for consciousness.
That is very powerful. You said so many things in there that I loved so much, but a vehicle for consciousness, that is very powerful. But do you think it's because of the way that you approach astrology? Because I like to say you can't have astrology without the astrologer. And
Yeah.
that whoever you are, in terms of your worldview and what you believe about yourself or your potential, about your ability to have agency in your life, that
Mm,
is going to show in terms of how you interpret the sky, that the sky
yeah.
just is. So when
Right.
you use astrology as a vehicle for
Mm,
consciousness, which I
mhm,
love that phrasing, which I completely resonate with so strongly, do
mm.
you think it might be because of who you are as the astrologer, that that's a part of the
I mean,
equation?
I think that's inevitably a part of the truth of it. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that we all come at it in such different ways. We and I don't by any means think this is the only way, but I do think there's no there's no astrology separate from the people who are, we are the story. We are the ones who tell, and we're hearing the story, and sharing the stories. And so I think, yeah, how you share the story is going to be based on where you yourself are positioned, and that's why that's why also no one gets to claim to be the astrologer, do they? I mean, like this is the truth. No one gets to really. I mean, people people definitely do it all the time, but but I think
Yes.
the notion that is possible. Yeah, it undermines the premise of the whole thing again, which is we're all positioned in different spots and different times, and the thing that's so great about astrology is it lets you claim your spot, right? I mean, even the chart itself is where you were born and when you were born. That's your spot, and you're getting a description of the geography of your spot with your chart, right? You're getting a feel of all the different threads, all the different pieces, and in some ways you're just learning how to be in your spot. That's actually a lifelong practice. Like, how do I learn to be in this spot that I'm in time and space, and how do I get along with all the others that are in the spots around me, right? And how do we do this together? Because that's the other thing. It really does again and again reinforce that we're all in this together, right? I mean, everybody else is also part of this time stream that you are in. Everybody else is on this planet with you, and all in different types of relation. And as you said, it's not a pretty even thing. It's all mixed up and overlapping and contradicting. But to me, you to come back to what you said, yeah, it is about the spot the astrologer inhabits and what they offer. And I think that's why people get such great stuff from many people will say to me they've had many readings, and usually they say it in a way that isn't about, oh, those weren't good and now I've come here. It's usually, those were great and I want more. I want to learn more about it. I want to see it from other dimensions and other perspectives. And that's how I look at it when I think about our friends in the astrology world. There's a lot of interesting stuff. and and
Yes.
and helpful, and I think from the taken in the right perspective, it almost always can help you become more embodied, more present, more, available to what wants to happen in your life.
So every planet is someplace on a journey. That is the
Oh yeah.
name of your talk for this
Yeah.
wonderful Embracing the Community, a celebration of astrology's online conference event. I'm calling it the online conference event of the year. And this is going to take place over Autumn Equinox weekend 2021.
Mm.
It is a London School of Astrology Synchronicity University joint event. So tell me about your talk. I love the title, first of all.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this really it's a quick look at the houses in a very, in a way that is respecting of the way that the houses were actually developed, right? And how did they come to be? They came to be by people observing, different areas of the sky, and then the stories that the ancients told us about those, and that they watched the planets go through there every day. So it's taking a diurnal motion approach. So in other words, rather than going 1 to 12, right, we're going 12 to 1, you could say. It's going the way the planets actually make the journey each day. And uh, and and by taking some of the ancient distinctions, like the gates of Hades that were located in the second and eighth house, like the planetary joys that were observed, and like night and day distinctions, by considering those, a lot of times my experience is people, when they learn the houses, it feels a little random sometimes. So, why is the same house about information, networking, brother, sister? Like, it's not always immediately obvious why these all go together. And but if we go back to the origins of how these were seen, it actually becomes quite uh, remarkable and beautiful. And the houses, I really, they kind of come to some of the points that we're making now, right? I mean, the houses are the way that uh, the celestial becomes terrestrial, right? It's like that's really what they are. And so if you want to really get into our own embodied experience of our chart, the houses are the way, are where, they house, they create a meaningful context for the planet to express. And so when planets are going through, they're almost at like way stations on a pilgrimage, right? Each of those places, and those places gives them a way to come into the world. And so it's very much, the place in our chart that it matters where you were on Earth, right? Your location matters, and so we'll be going through the houses with those different distinctions from the ancients, and then it does. My experience in teaching this occasionally has been that it really creates a whole other wave of understanding what's going on in the chart, and a lot of times I'll find myself, for instance, when I'm in sessions with people, speaking about just what's it like to be in the 11th house where you're climbing towards the midheaven, right? There's this climb going on, and it's a succeedant house. It has an engine in it. It's like you're being pushed forward. You're like there's a lot of forward motion. Whereas you just came from the 12th, where you're like drifting away from the ascendant into the daytime sky. Very different experience, and so we'll be just talking about that so that it becomes a little bit more of an embodied experience of what does it feel like to be a planet in a house. That's really the question really is, what does it feel like to be in a certain house, right? What does it feel like when you're in the ninth and you're floating away from the midheaven happily, and then suddenly you get to the eighth and you're going down,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's an experience. So we'll talk about what's the experience of the planets in each of the houses, right? And then describe a little bit, because we don't have a lot of time there, but we'll describe a little bit of how does that give rise then to the traditional interpretations of the houses, right? But we want to get kind of under the keywords of the houses into what's the situation, what is the habitat that the planet finds itself in. Yeah.
Oh my God,
It's
it
a lot of
sounds
talk, but I hope I
incredible.
hope it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's taking the celestial and making it terrestrial
Yes, yes,
when we look at the houses. So the celestial is the planets, but the
yes,
houses is what makes it real for us, helps us to
right.
actually take that celestial energy and use it in a very lived way in our earthly experience. And so
Yes.
your talk is going to help us to understand exactly how to do that. And I love what you said about to understand how planet feels like. So I will say
Yeah.
my first book was called Astrology, is called Astrology Realized. And a lot of it is rooted around this idea of that a realized reading is an experience. It is a physical reading.
Yes.
It is something that you understand emotionally. And the way
Yeah.
to do that is to make emotional connections with the planets and with the skies so that you're
Mhm.
able to really dive deep and understand that symbol that much more personally, because it
Mhm.
makes it that much more likely that you're going to be able to touch on truth, as opposed to
Mhm.
what's called a speculative reading, which is like, for
Mm.
example, Pluto in a house, any given house, Pluto in the ninth house could mean 15 different things. But how a person is experiencing that energy,
Yeah.
a client
Yeah.
before you is experiencing that, is going to be much more specific. And you can only get to that if you understand the emotional energy that is
Yeah.
occurring around that planet
Yeah.
and within that particular house. This is
Mhm.
an idea that actually comes from Jeffrey Cornelius. So I do want to give him a shout out there.
Mhm.
But it sounds fascinating. I'm so excited. I'm all for like creating that emotional connection, because really
Yes.
the planets are us. We
Yes.
are an expression of the planets. When we say that we are an expression of the divine, the
Mm.
planets are divine. They were
Mm.
understood as divinities up until very, very
Mm.
recently in human history. And so
Mm.
that's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very alive, and yes, and to me that's what we get to see is the houses sort of tell us how those divine energies become incarnate in the world of form, right? And where in our lives. And as you say, yeah, I'm a person who's never been able to do cold readings of charts. I at one point I think there was such a valuing of that sometimes in the astrology world. I thought, well, maybe I'm not an astrologer because I don't really feel comfortable just starting to, oh yeah, well, this chart, but I just need someone to talk even for just 2 minutes or a minute. All I need is a minute or two, and I'm going to hear a planet talking. Right, as soon as they say anything about anything, I really don't care what they say or what. It doesn't even matter. I'm just going to hear or feel some planet, and then I'm going to be in the chart, and then it's going to be a conversation. Right, that even just 20 seconds, even just an email, 2 lines, but you'll hear it, and then we're in, and then it will go where it needs to go, right? And the symbol speaks. You don't even have to speak, right? You let it make itself known. So yeah. So I hope that is what will happen. Oops. I hope that is what will happen in the talk as well. Is that
Well,
is that people will have a lived experience of like feeling, oh, that's what my Jupiter's going through over there, or that's what my, that's what I'm hopeful of. Yeah.
I'm so excited about your talk, Jason. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for
Sure.
taking this time to put on your nerd hat with me and talk astrology the way that I like
Glad
to
to.
talk about it, all philosophical. And once again, Jason's talk is going to be part of the Embracing the Community online conference event of the year. And you can learn more about that and use your discount code at synchronicityuniversity.com. Once again, thank you, Jason. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Okay.
And thank you, everybody out there. And until we connect again, take care. Bye.